Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another recital in the Music at Midday series from St Paul's Cathedral, London, Ontario. And again today the recital is being presented from my home here in Stratford on my Make-In digital instrument. I continue today to respond to the many requests that I've had for certain repertoire and pieces by certain composers, so quite a tapestry of repertoire in today's programme. I begin with a piece by a 20th century German composer, Hermann Schroeder, who was born in 1904, died in 1984, so he lived right across the 20th century. Very much a contemporary composer. He didn't reject totally the romantic way of composing, but certainly he wanted to move on into other things with his music. But certainly he employed old forms such as Gregorian chant and faubourns in his music. So you'll hear some of those old styles in these two compositions that I'm going to begin with. Two short pieces by Hermann Schroeder, two intermezzi. The first one uses the full range of the organ, a little bit like a toccata, and then the second one you'll hear the fifths moving in the left hand, very much part of the medieval type of harmony going on. So the first two pieces by German composer Hermann Schroeder. In English church music circles, one of the most popular composers is perhaps Herbert Howells, who wrote both organ music and choral music, and for most of his life was associated with the church. He was born in Gloucestershire in England in 1892, and in his youth was very much associated with Gloucester Cathedral as an articled assistant organist. and he then moved to London, where he studied at the Royal College of Music under Stanford, and he knew Vaughan Williams well. In the music of Herbert Howells, you'll hear the influence of jazz, perhaps jazz in slower motion, but certainly with the Americans introducing the element of jazz to the Europeans during World War I. You'll hear this element sometimes in the music of Herbert Howells. I'm going to play one of his psalm preludes from the second set, which he wrote just around the time of the beginning of World War II. And the particular piece I'm playing has a program, as it were. It's based on a text, Psalm 130 verse 1, "Out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord." So perhaps that has some reflection on our times right now that we're going through in terms of the COVID-19. And in the music you'll hear the very haunting opening on the softest stops of the organ, and then it gradually builds and builds, but the sunshine comes out at the end as it resolves to a wonderful D major. So the next piece on the programme, Psalm Prelude by Herbert Howells. The next piece on the programme is by another English composer, Barry Ferguson, who was born in 1942 and spent all of his working life in English church music in the cathedrals. He began as an assistant organist at Peterborough Cathedral, then moved on to be organist at Wimborne Minster in Dorset, and then he finished at Rochester Cathedral in Kent as director of music. In his retirement, he is writing a lot of music and lecturing and continuing to give organ recitals. He was actually a student of Herbert Howells, and you'll hear some of the thumbprints of Herbert Howells's compositional style in the works of Barry Ferguson. And in this piece that I'm going to play for you, it's a chorale prelude based on a hymn tune that Barry Ferguson wrote for his teacher at his high school, Clifton College, Douglas Fox. And the hymn tune is called Dernis. And before I play the chorale prelude upon which it is based, I'm going to play that hymn tune, Dernis, first. So the next piece on the programme, the chorale prelude on Dernis by Barry Ferguson, preceded by the hymn tune. The words of the hymn that Barry Ferguson has set to music come from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. He that is down need fear no ill. Perhaps very appropriate for our times. So now the chorale prelude on Dernis by Barry Ferguson. The next piece on the programme is by César Franck, a French composer who is hailed as probably one of the most famous of the organist composers from the 19th century, hailing from Paris. César Franck was actually born in Liège in 1822, and Liège at that time was part of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, and today it's part of Belgium, but in fact France has claimed César Franck most firmly as their composer. He was organist of Saint Clotilde in Paris for about 30 years and taught at the conservatory, was a wonderful performer and also improviser, and gave many of the opening recitals on new instruments by the famous organ builder Cavaillé-Coll. César Franck wrote some really big pieces for the organ, pieces which would last perhaps the length of the Tuesday recitals that I've been doing, some of them 20-25 minutes in length. But I'm going to play for you now a miniature by César Franck. This piece was not very well known until fairly recently, and it was used as an encore at a recital at St Paul's Cathedral in London, England, when I was organ scholar there, and everybody was clamouring to know what was that wonderful piece at the end of the recital used as an encore. And it was César Franck's little Andantino in G minor. It's a delicate miniature, and it uses the beautiful string stops, flute stops, and the clarinet stop also of the organ. So the next piece on the programme, the Andantino in G minor by César Franck. The final piece on today's programme has a connection to Canada. It's a short piece by an English composer called Alan Ridout, who is actually related to the Canadian composer Godfrey Ridout, a distant cousin, I understand. Alan Ridout was born in 1934. He lived most of his life in Canterbury and was very much associated with the music of the cathedral there, commissioned many times by the organist, Dr. Alan Wicks, to write music for the cathedral choir, also organ works. Alan Ridout, though, taught at Cambridge University and the Royal Academy of Music. He had many students in composition, including myself when I was at high school in Canterbury, so I knew Alan Ridout fairly well. A wonderful teacher. He wrote some very different organ music, some of it very jazzy and original, and I'm going to finish today's programme with a piece called Scherzo by Alan Ridout, which uses the elements of jazz in terms of its rhythm, using the full range of the organ. So I finish today, Scherzo by Alan Ridout.